Thank you. Like Marcella said, I'm here to talk about the effect of anti-LGBT discrimination laws on school outcomes and school climate for LGBT youth. Before I start, I'd like to thank my advisor, Professor Xavier Wotipka, for really helping me from before I even knew I wanted to write a thesis and really guiding me through the whole process. So to start, I want to just call attention to why this is important, why focusing on LGBT high school students is something that we should be doing. And basically they face very disproportionately high rates of bullying, victimization, cyberbullying, unsafe feelings at school. And that leads to worse outcomes where they do not go to higher education, they perform worse in high school. There are tons of studies out there that talk about the economic implications of higher education and doing well in school. And if we have an entire identity of high school students who is systemically disadvantaged, that is an issue that needs to be resolved. So my approach for talking through my thesis about this issue is to look at statewide anti-LGBT discrimination laws. So I take these policies and I connect them to LGBT student experiences through a policy diffusion framework that looks at how individual states and communities react to policy. From there, I will talk about the data that I use to represent this and how I answer this research question using a linear regression model. I will walk through one case of that regression. I'll just show you what is happening in schools as a result of anti-discrimination laws. Then I will take a sec to talk about two case studies of two districts, one in Iowa and one in Ohio, and how, at the district level, we are seeing these social impacts of anti-LGBT discrimination laws. And then I will bring the quantitative and qualitative data together and conclude with some ideas for future research on the topic. So first, anti-LGBT discrimination laws. I think the best, most important thing to note here is that there are very few national statutes for LGBT protections. Outside of marriage equality, there's very little at the national level and all done by states. This is a graph that shows sort of how these laws have been passed over time. I focus on 6 anti-discrimination laws in this study: employment protections, housing, public accommodations, hate crime enumeration, so whether or not gender identity and sexual orientation are included in hate crime statutes, conversion therapy or ex-gay therapy, which is a process which is largely panned by the medical community of reversing an individual's LGBT identity, and marriage equality. So this shows just the general trend of what these policies have looked like over time, sort of picking up steam in the 90s and early 2000s. This is a geographic representation of where states have anti-discrimination laws. This map is for employment, but it largely looks the same for each of the laws. The orange states are states that have protections for both gender identity and sexual orientation, and the blue states, which is only Wisconsin, has just sexual orientation. So the general trend is that states on the West Coast, parts of the Midwest, and the Northeast have protections, and the rest of the country generally does not have protections. So in this case, in the South, an employee could be terminated for their LGBT status, and that is perfectly legal. I want to point out Iowa and Ohio. These are the states I will be studying in case studies. Both are Midwestern. Iowa generally has anti-discrimination policies, and Ohio does not. So moving to my reaction model. So typical public policy frameworks would expect that policy results from public opinion changes, where people vote for something or want something to happen because their opinion changes, and then policy reflects that. But there is sort of the reverse model, where after a law is passed, the public reacts to it. There was a study done on how individuals change their opinion on LGBT issues after marriage equality was passed in their state. And they came up with 4 ways that the public communities can react. First is backlash, where the policy is seen as overreach and people sort of double down on their negative feelings towards the issues. Legitimacy, that is where, because there is a law, the issue seems more legitimate, and then people improve their opinion of LGBT issues. Consensus is that classical idea of public policy where the law is passed because people are already having that sort of feeling, so opinion does not change. And polarization, which is a mix of backlash and legitimacy, where individuals who have strong opinions will just strengthen either in the positive or negative direction. And then my hypothesis is from these public reactions, they affect community values, community norms, how people interact with each other, which will then lead to either negative school outcomes or positive school outcomes, depending on how public opinion changes after the policy is passed. Which leads me to my research question. What influence do anti-LGBT discrimination laws have on school climate and outcomes for LGBT high school students? So essentially I will be looking at what the effect of these laws have, like looking at before and after the laws passed and how school climate outcomes change. So I'll look at my data and methodology. Data is very limited for LGBT high school student experience, either because national surveys do not ask about sexual orientation of respondents, or those that do are very private in order to protect the identity and privacy of the respondents. So I used the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance System. That's a data set put out by the CDC every other year that asks a variety of health-related questions for high school students. And starting in, I believe, 2009, some states began to ask about sexual orientation of respondents. So using that data set, I can map some school outcomes and school climate measures to students in certain states with their sexual orientation attached. And for a compilation of anti-discrimination laws, I used a compilation from the Movement Advancement Project. That's an organization dedicated to mapping and tracking these laws over time. And they have comprehensive lists of statutes in different states and when they were passed. So using these data sets together, I come to my regression, which I'll walk through step by step to show how I'm measuring this. So outcome is a vector of 4 different outcomes from the YRBSS that I used. They are bullying rates, cyberbullying rates, so online forms of harassment, victimization, unsafe feelings, so whether a student has missed class before because of feeling unsafe at school, and self-reported grades, so more academic outcomes we look at. Beta 0 is the baseline constant for non-LGBT students, so just like the baseline bullying rate for students across the board. Beta 1 looks at the difference between non-LGBT and LGBT students. Notably, there's no T here. That's because the question on the YRBSS only asks about sexual orientation, so I cannot generalize these results to transgender students as well. But it gives an idea of what sexual orientation minorities, how they are different in these outcomes. Beta 2 looks at the effect of the presence of an LGBT policy on these outcomes, so just for all students, whether or not having an inclusive law affects outcomes. And beta 3 is the variable of interest. It's the interaction between policy and LGBT status. So what this means is beta 3 is the difference in outcomes for students who are in states with inclusive laws versus students who are in states without such laws. So that is what I'll be primarily focusing on in my analysis and really trying to parse out the effect of. It all draws back to the reaction model of how, like, before and after these laws, what is changing in students. For controls, I controlled for race, age, and sex of students. I also included time-fixed effects and state-fixed effects. The purpose of those is to really parse out just the effect of policy, because obviously policy depends on the year and depends on which states are passing them. And there are large differences in both bullying rates and how LGBT issues are talked about in these states. So by controlling for state and year, I hope to eliminate some of those general trends across time and geographically. Turning to results. So because I have 4 outcomes and 6 anti-discrimination laws, that was a total of 24 regressions. I'll just focus on one, so looking at how employment discrimination laws affect bullying rates. So starting actually at the bottom at the constant, that is a 34.5% bullying rate for non-LGBT students. So students, about 35% of straight students reported being bullied in the last year. The difference for LGBT students is 18 percentage points, which is a very large increase, statistically and economically significant, where they face almost 50% higher rates of bullying, brings the bullying rate to over 50%, which is very significant. And that is confirmed in the literature, where there are many climate surveys looking at how LGBT students navigate high schools. Anti-LGBT discrimination policy, that is beta 2 from the equation. This is not an economically or statistically significant number, which was to be expected. There is no significant relationship between, or this cannot show that there's any significant relationship between presence of a policy and just general outcomes. That trend is seen across almost all 24 regressions. However, the interaction term is significant, which shows that while there's no large effect that these discrimination policies have on student outcomes, there is an effect on LGBT students specifically. So this is essentially saying that while LGBT students face an 18 percentage point higher rate of bullying, that is reduced by 6 percentage points if they are in a state that has inclusive laws. And sort of across these regressions, in 3 of the 4 outcomes, there is a significant relationship in that interaction term. So what that means is that, for LGBT students in these states, just simply the presence of a law is enough to have some sort of relationship to their outcomes, and I was working on parsing out that relationship in the case studies. One outcome, unsafe feelings, did not have a significant relationship, and the reduction in the outcome gap generally ranged between 25 and 35%, which is quite significant. Obviously, it does not create complete equity, but it is a move in the right direction, especially for seemingly unrelated laws. Moving to the case studies, like I said, I looked at 1 district in Iowa and 1 in Ohio. I picked them because they're similar in a lot of very important ways. They are both Midwestern states. Both districts are suburban and have similar enrollments. The big differences, as relevant to this study, are that Iowa is a state that has many anti-discrimination laws, and Ohio is a state that has none. And the county that the Iowa City Community School District is in largely votes Democratically, and Mason City Schools in Ohio largely votes Republican. So looking at the Iowa case, there is a lot of codified district support for LGBT students. On their website, they have an entire resource page for both students and parents of community organizations, national organizations, like just vocabulary, really a lot of things to do just to support students and parents in understanding LGBT issues. In 2017, in response to the school climate disparities, kind of like what was shown in my regression, the district set up an LGBT task force of different community members who had stakes in the LGBT community, who basically got together, did research, and found both problems in the community and then policy recommendations for reacting to it. And the district immediately began to act on these policy recommendations. They started to incorporate increased curriculum inclusion, so including LGBT issues in curriculum at all ages. They did a better job of figuring out what the student social life was like and implementing student groups. And in addition, community and student newspapers report frequently on LGBT issues. In high school newspapers, students have been talking about LGBT issues in school and nationally since 2009, and especially noting in 2015. After that, the articles became more nuanced and more frequent, where students would really give in-depth profiles of what is happening in their school. For Ohio, a large difference is basically that there is very little information available. Their district does not say anything about LGBT students. When asked, district administrators essentially said that they are conforming with national law and are already accommodating their students, which, as I mentioned before, there is no national law, so they are not doing anything extra to help. But what many administrators, both in schools and in the district, have said is that if a law were to be passed, they would immediately respond to it and provide protection for the students. To contrast, students have been reporting on LGBT issues in a similar way to the Iowa City District, which could be a generational difference where just students in general are more cognizant of these issues and wanting to talk about them. And similar patterns are seen where students have been talking about them since the newspaper records are around, and in 2015 they began to talk more openly about them. So comparing these, the Iowa case provides evidence for the legitimation policy and reaction structure, where not only after laws were passed, but after research came out, the district became very invested in providing support for their students. So having these large codified institutions show that LGBT issues are widely accepted, sort of energize them to pass more policy. In Ohio, it's unclear, largely because there are no discrimination laws, and Ohio is not a state that is included at all in the YRBSS, so I couldn't look at student data there. But from the comments that district administrators have, it is likely that either a polarization or legitimation structure would come, where they react positively to laws even though they do not have anything in place right now. Bringing these together, the quantitative side really showed that there is some sort of correlation between anti-discrimination laws and positive outcomes for LGBT students, where that works a little bit towards equity in their outcomes and school climate and academic performance. And qualitatively, by only looking at 2 examples, we see just a little glimpse of what it is like at the actual district level and how they're responding to these policies. The student perspective is largely equivalent between the 2 states, which was interesting to me, which could be for many reasons. It could be because of who, like the type of student who's writing for student journals. It could be because they're largely white suburban districts. Just differences in similarities between student perspectives that lead to that. And just to bring it back to the public reaction model, both sides sort of point to legitimacy, but cannot say with any sort of causality that these laws are affecting and causing better outcomes. A few limitations to my study. First and foremost, data restrictions. Like I said, there is not very much available for LGBT students just because of privacy concerns. And because of that, I could not do a very sophisticated regression. I would love to have access to more expansive LGBT high school data to figure out both the time mechanism and the causal mechanism of what is happening for these changes in outcome. For example, I only looked at before and after the laws passed, but it would be interesting to study if things changed like immediately, or if there was a longer term effect of these laws being passed. Additionally, I only could account for 2 case studies in a more full-fledged study, seeing a wider range of districts in, for example, a conservative district in a liberal state, or vice versa, or looking at districts in states with explicitly discriminatory laws, like the transgender bathroom laws that are typically seen. Would be interesting to get a better idea of what is happening and how districts are responding to these laws. So in conclusion, there is support for the legitimation structure in public opinion, where anti-LGBT discrimination laws are having some sort of influence or relationship on LGBT students in high schools. But district reactions are very diverse, where it's hard to say exactly where that reaction stems from, but they are, but districts in states that have these laws are doing some sort of intervention to provide support for LGBT students. And this provides a lot of room for future research. We're really understanding the mechanism behind anti-discrimination laws and school climate measures could provide support for different policies and policy interventions at both the state level and the district level. Thank you for listening. I'll now